I have a ton of opinions, especially about a lot of decks coming out with Lost Origin, and I think we should make a tier list. Hey everybody, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we are making a tier list for Lost Origin, the Pokemon TCG set that is coming out on September 9th. Despite the fact that I feel like I've been saying in a month or a few weeks, for what feels like a month now, it's still somehow 3 weeks away, at least at the time of recording, and that feels not great. So we're going to go ahead and look at a tier list. We're going to make some predictions about decks just based on the very little that I know about a fair bit of them. But we're going to go ahead and see how they do, and we'll, you know, that's kind of today's video. It's super easy, casual. Sometimes you got to keep it easy, breezy, cover girl. You know what I'm saying? If you haven't already, do me a favor, hit the like button. I don't know. I'm going to just stop talking for a second. Backtrack. Just like something wrong with me. If you haven't already, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a like and a comment. Those things tell YouTube this is a good channel and other people should watch it. And here we go, tier maker time. So here we go, tier maker. These are going to be ordered left to right. Some of the cards I don't remember what they do, I think, but we're going to figure it out. We're just going to kind of start off Arceus Dorado. I actually think Arceus Dorado, despite my last video of me saying it might be a really good pick for Worlds, it's not a tier 1 deck. It's just not. It has some really good matchups, but its best matchups are single prize decks that aren't like crazy competitive, but it does have some favorable matchups. But its biggest issue is itself, which is very unfortunate. Arceus Gyarados. We're gonna kind of just throw it into tier 1.5 for now. Anything Arceus is usually good enough for it to be viable. The energy disruption from Gyarados is really nice. You can throw the memory capsule Jolteon in there to turn off the Shady Dealings line and turn off Pakia, things like that. So that can really stop a lot of decks. So we'll kind of keep it there. Arceus Intel, I'm torn if it's going to go from tier 1 to tier 1.5 or just kind of be at the bottom of tier 1. And we'll talk about why in a little while, but it does its thing. There is some like, you know, there's some ways that we can kind of buff it with like the goodra and kind of make it like a real tanky build, but we can throw a Lake Acuity in there since we already have the water energies with Melanie and stuff, so we can really kind of like make Arceus Intel really tanky, which is why I think it might stay tier 1, but we'll just kind of skip to Giratina. I think Giratina is going to pose a little bit of a problem. If Giratina can set up really quickly and start getting energies, which with Arceus they don't necessarily need the Lost Zone to use Mirage Gate to accelerate energies. They can just go ahead and use Trinity Charge, Trinity Nova to power up a Giratina, and they could be knocking out Arceus V-Stars really easily, especially if you throw in things like Lost Sweeper to get rid of big charms. You bump that Lake Acuity, and next thing you know, you don't have the 350 health essentially that you could. You have 280, and Giratina can do that pretty easily. So I do think Giratina is going to be really good. It could be a flop, kind of like we saw with Rayquaza, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Arceus Flying Pikachu. I'm going to put this in tier 1.5 for now. Things might change as other decks come up, but tier 1.5, it's good. It has a pretty decent Palkia matchup, and that's kind of the best thing it has going for it. It's going to be really good against Regis. It's going to be really good against random single prize decks because of Max Balloon, but otherwise, it's not anything crazy. And again, when we get to those much higher tiers of competitive play, you don't really see a lot of single prizes, at least not right now. So, you know, I don't anticipate it being much better than 1.5. Arceus Magnzone. Arceus Magnzone Decidueye. That can be interesting because the Decidueye can deal with Miltanks and Blissies. It can deal with opposing Arceus, things like that. It has pretty good damage output, and then you have the Magnzone for the Palkias, because Magnzone I think hits 160 or 180. So either way, you're gonna one-shot a Palkia V-Star. Both of them have a lightning or fighting respectively, and double colorless is their attack cost. So very easy to power up with Arceus, very easy to power up with a attachment, and then DTE the following turn, or Raihan DTE. So could be pretty interesting. Having a few different energy types in there isn't that big of a deal, especially with Arceus. I don't think Magnzone and Decidueye are super good. They're fine. I'm going to kind of put it at tier 2 for now. I'm actually losing a little bit of confidence in it. Blissey's tier 2. It's kind of... It might have a decent matchup to something like Palkia, because you're benching so low and you can kind of use the Miltank to block the Palkia at least a little. They can hit you with Greninja, they can hit you with Inteleon, which are things you do have to worry about. They do have Red Candy often, so they can just kind of go straight into Inteleon, hit for 120, and knock out that Miltank, especially if they have like a Tool Jam or a Scrapper to get rid of a Cape. So not really crazy about Miltank Blissey, especially once Zoroark comes into play. Inteleon, Arceus Inteleon decks are dropping Dunsparce. You know, you might have a Dunsparce in your Blissey deck, but I don't know. Something about it, I'm just not super crazy about Blissey, and so I'm going to kind of throw it into tier 2. Reggie's is tier 2 as well. I've seen some talk on Twitter about Reggie's being better, and that like there's like this new turbo build and all that for Reggie's, but until I really start to see it have some good success, I'm going to kind of keep it in that tier 2. If your opponent knows how to play against it, they start using those single prize Pokemon, they, get a Dunsparce into play, Arceus Inteleon, you're not going to be able to one-shot, they're going to stay in that Sharon's loop. You're in a lot of danger for Greninja to come in and really start putting a lot of pressure onto Pokemon, Inteleons, things like that. It's okay. It's okay at best. Darkrai, Moltres. Darkrai is, I think, a little bit better than people give it credit for. You can get especially if you're going first, you can get so many energies and get a Darkrai to hit you could smack Arceus right in the face and deal really good damage with Darkrai. I mean, it has a very high damage output cap because it does damage based on how many energies you can get into play, with things like Moltres V, Dark Patch, Galarian Moltres, then your attachment for turn, Raihan, all these things can get you all these energies into play, and that it's really solid. It can be kind of annoying if your opponent paths you early and that path sticks, so you're not able to use Diaflame Wings, you're not able to use Star Abyss or whatever the Darkrai V-Star ability is. So that can be kind of annoying, but you have ways to deal with it. You do have Crobats to help draw, which if Pat's in play you can't use, but there are things that there's a lot of things that this deck has going for it. So I'm actually going to kind of put it ahead of Gyarados here, and we'll keep it there. Sneasler, I'm going to put this at the top of tier 2 for now, just because I don't know how it's going to be, but you can severe poison and lock opponents out, and it can be super annoying. It'll just put a bunch of damage counters onto things with the Radiant Sneasler. But once that Sneasler is knocked out, or if you're not able to keep up the neutralizing gas, or if a Pokemon isn't really relying on the ability, then you're kind of stuck, and you really don't have much going for you. Pokemon evolve out of status conditions. There's so many switch and escape ropes and things like that, where they might force a different Pokemon into the active, and now they can use abilities to get rid of that poison, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. It'll be definitely, when it works, it'll be super annoying, but not really looking too great. The Inteleon VMAX, like the double Inteleon, really hard to one-shot. If they get their loop going towards the end of the game, they give up a couple of prizes, whatever. But if they get that loop going, and now you can't knock out this Inteleon, I think it's really annoying. But there is a fair amount of electric in the format, between like the flying Pikachus, the Magnzone that's going to come out, random electric stuff, because everybody's trying to counter Palkia, Tapu Kokos, things like that. So you do You do have to worry about that, especially being a 3 prize Pokemon, and if you don't get that set up, if your opponent's able to boss up your V, and you never really get going, you're in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to kind of keep it towards the back of 1.5, but it might get dropped down to 2. Lost Zone box, I think, is another one that kind of falls into this tier 2. I do love the Lost Zone engine. I love the Comfeys. I think Cramorant's really good. You'll be able to Thornton into stuff. You can Thornton into your Radiant Pokemon, and like Radiant Heatran, Radiant Charizard, whatever, and just hit for really big damage. Maybe it'd be really good, but Lost Zone has that element of, if you Lost Zone the wrong pieces, if you can't find what you need off the Lost Zone, like that's like your main draw is the Lost Zone oftentimes. So if you don't find what you need, then you're just kind of stuck and you're just, living on top deck mode. So not sure exactly how it's going to be. You're a single prize. If your best attacker is constantly doing 110 damage, sure, you don't need any energies. That's Cramorant's thing. It does 110 damage. And if you have 4 more cards in the Lost Zone, you can ignore its energy, its cost, or its attack cost, whatever. That's great. But you're doing 110, and then 110. And then 100, it takes 3 hits to knock out a Pokemon vmax, and that's not including if you're going against like a goodra, you're going against Arceus Intel, things that can have a fair amount of damage resistance or healing. So you're gonna get 2 attacks off, and then just for your opponent to Sharon's Care, and now they've taken 2-3 prizes in the process because it's been 2 turns plus the turn they Sharon's. So I'm not crazy about it. I think it's really cool. I think it's really fun. And like I said, I do really enjoy the Lost Zone engine. I just don't know if it's going to be competitive. Goodra's another one. I think it's basically Arceus Intelion, just with more steps. You got the Lost Zone. But once you can get that Lost Zone going, I'm big on Goodra. I do think it's going to be good. I don't think it's going to be like the greatest. And maybe I'm underselling it a little bit here. But, you can essentially have 350 health between all of the damage reduction you're taking. And it doesn't matter if that damage is coming from a Pokemon V, it's coming from a single prize, it doesn't matter. And that's really, really solid. Being able to do an additional negative, or your opponent dealing less, 120 less damage with things like Fantina if they hit you with a V, Iron Rollout, Lake Acuity, Radiant Gardevoir. You could take 240 less damage from Pokemon V during your opponent's next turn. And what's really hitting for 240 or more? Pakia can do it if you both have full benches. You don't really have a full bench for Goodra. Giratina can do hit, but they hit you for 280, whatever. You're doing 40 damage, and they got to discard 2 energies? Come on, that's really, really solid. Giratina Lost Zone. I'm gonna kind of put this. I'm gonna put this right around the Darkrai. I don't know which of these 3 is better. I actually might move the Pikachu down. I'm gonna move the Pikachu down. I don't know which of these 3 are going to be better. Kind of have to see it go, but I mean, the Giratina, you're going to use the Lost Zone to be hyper aggressive. Goodra, you're going to use Lost Zone to be super defensive. If you both decks have the same issue, if you don't find what you need from the Lost Zone, or if you can't get that piece, whatever, then the deck kind of falls apart and you're just kind of living in top deck mode. If you do, you're rolling, and that's not a pun on Iron Rollout. You just get to do whatever it is you want. Lunatone Solrock. It's not that good. I'm gonna change this to not sure, because I don't know how it's gonna be. If this turns out to be really, really good, you might see some dark stuff come back into the format, and then now you have these 2-3 prize Pokemon, especially with Shadow Rider. It's going to be super easy to one-shot a Shadow Rider, and also all you need is boss Shadow Rider KO, boss Shadow Rider KO. It doesn't really matter what the Deoxys is doing, so not really sure how it's doing, but I don't anticipate it to be very good. I do think Mew stays pretty good. I do think it stays towards the bottom of Tier 1. Mewtwo Miltank. This is so tough because Giratina is going to have Shred, and so they could just shred a couple of Miltanks and then get 10 cards into the Lost Zone and then just instantly knock out that V-Union, and that's 4 or 5 prizes just like that. So I'm going to kind of put this there. Mewtwo Shadow Rider kind of suffers the same issue as Deoxys Shadow Rider. I don't anticipate it being super great, but if you can get it going, you can. It's the same premise as Darkrai, except the difference between Darkrai and Shadow Rider is that one, Darkrai's weakness is grass, which is far less common than Dark, and you don't have 3 prizes like you do with Shadow Rider. So because of those two things, I think it's just a lot worse than Darkrai, but you know, who knows. Palkia Ice Rider I think is very good. I think it's a tier 1 deck. I know people might put it into tier 1.5, but I definitely think it's a tier 1 deck. And we'll kind of talk about all the Palkias at once. I do think Palkia Intelion is like probably one of the best decks, and I still think it stays that way. But basically, you have the ability of hitting super hard. You punish your opponent for having a wide bench. If they don't have a wide bench, you limit their options, and then you can come in with Palkia, hit really hard. Ice Rider, for those times where your opponent does have a short bench, they only bench 2-3 Pokemon, you're playing Arceus Intelion, you're playing some other V-Star, something like that, Giratina, 280 health, Goodra, 270 health. You could just come in with the Ice Rider, max lance it with the Choice Belt, hit for 280, done, no problem. And then because you have Palkia to power up Ice Rider, you're not necessarily relying on a Melody Loop, which means you can run something like Leon to take a one-shot on a Goodra or an Arceus V-Star with a Choice Belt, because now you can use Leon to do an extra 30 damage. So you're hitting 310, you have things like Quick Shooting to hit 330. You do a lot of damage. Palkia V-Star is all of that except without the Ice Rider, so you just kind of have to rely a little bit more on things like Cross Switchers, Echoing Horn, to knock out Pokemon V before they get a chance to evolve, and you really disrupt your opponent. The Palkia Kurum, I think, is going to be really good too. I think pretty much any Palkia deck is going to be really solid. The energy acceleration from Kurum vmax is really cool. It has a slightly obscure weakness. The only thing that on this list that it's weak to is the Dialga. So maybe if that becomes really, really popular with the Ice Rider and with the Kyurem, however it's pronounced, we might see a little uptick in something like random Zacian Zamazenta decks. We might see a little bit more Dialga. Both Zacian and Zamazenta are getting V stars, so maybe that'll be a thing. I have no idea about this this Dugon deck. I'm gonna put Ice Rider kind of somewhere in a very middle of the road deck. It's solid, and if you can get double Ice Rider maybe early and start setting things up, you can kind of get rolling. But if you miss Ice Rider turn 1, you're in so much trouble because your opponent's just gonna boss KO with 210 health. You know, the only thing you really have going for is the fact that you can one-shot Vs pretty easily, and you have the Intelion line. Other than that, it's fine. Giving up 3 prizes is not ideal. I think the Kyurem deck is going to be slightly better than that, but not by much. It suffers the same similar issue. You have a little bit more self-acceleration than you do with Ice Rider, but yeah. Ershifu in this new meta where Mew might see less play, and you start to see Arceus Intelion, Zoroark, and some random electric stuff. I do think Urshifu gets better. I do think Urshifu gets kind of better than what it has been in the past couple of weeks or month or two. You do have a pretty poor Palkia matchup. Maybe that'll change if Urshifu lists evolve with it. But in this particular list, Urshifu Blastoise, which is kind of just more of like a standard Urshifu, like Melony type of thing that runs Irida, I think it could be pretty solid. I'm actually really looking forward to playing some Urshifu list. Dialga gets... I think Dialga is fine. If it goes, it goes, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's kind of one of those deal. I don't know about this Zacian deck. Inteleon Radiant Charizard I'm not super crazy about, but some people love it. I think it's fine if you get to, if you know how to play it. And that's, of course, true of really any deck. If it works and it does what it's designed to do, it can be good. But one of the things is that its inherent playability, its inherent line of play, its adaptability to things. Radiant Charizard can be pretty good. I don't really care for the Zeraora V-Star. Zoroark box, I'm also not really crazy about. I think it's going to fall into this Reggie tier. Zoroark is definitely going to be top of tier 1.5, and decidueye Bibarel probably on its own is a 2. I don't think decidueye is that good outside of having something else. And then I don't know about this Ice Rider Frostlass thing. Not really sure. Just kind of trying to wrap it up a little bit here at the end. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole tier list. I'm going to move this so you guys can see the full final tier list. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Found it informative. Let me know what your thoughts are on this tier list. I want to know what deck are you most excited for when Lost Origin comes out. And yeah, it's going to do it for now. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.